Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Daniel
With Dan Irvin.
Well, I don't know if you've had this kind of experience in your life. Maybe you're going through a season, a difficult season or a trial, and you're just down. You're really down on yourself, on what's going on. And you think to yourself, well, God, I guess this is just what I deserve. This is my punishment for screwing things up the way that I have. I deserve what you're giving me right now. And you think of the trial or whatever you're going through, it's a sign of God's maybe absence, or a sign of God's judgment towards you and what you've done, his punishment. But what if some of the worst moments in our life weren't actually signs of his absence or his punishment raining down on us? But what if some of the worst moments, the trials in our life, were actually his signs of mercy? Let me try to use Daniel 4 to explain a little bit. We see Nebuchadnezzar hearing these words in verse 31, again, that we talked about yesterday. When God says, this is what is decreed for you. Your royal authority will be taken from you. You will be driven away from the people. You will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox. And this happens to Nebuchadnezzar. Now we have to ask ourselves, why would God do this? Why would God allow such a humiliating, catastrophic fall for King Nebuchadnezzar? I think it's because there's a reality here that it might be easy to miss, that this may be happening because God loved King Nebuchadnezzar too much to let him keep going down the path that he was going down. You see, Nebuchadnezzar had made his own greatness the center of his universe. We talked about this yesterday. His authority had become his identity. His kingdom that he built by his strength had become who he was. His throne had become his God. And so God, in love, in mercy, removes the very thing that is tearing him away from knowing him, from knowing truly what life is about, who God is. God is not lashing out in anger here in this story. I think he's reaching towards Nebuchadnezzar with an arm of mercy, drawing him in, drawing him back to himself, saying, the only way you'll truly recognize your need, your dependence on me, is if I take away the very thing that you've built your life on. Now, I think this is relevant for us. We live in a world that says that the worst thing that can happen to you is failure, personal failure, business failure, family failure, moral failure. We don't want failure. We don't strive for failure. We think about parenting. You've all been a kid yourself. Maybe some of you are parenting right now. One of the hardest things to ever go through as a kid, or maybe to ever see your own kids going through, is a situation that's outside of their control, something they're struggling with, something they can't do, something they can't get, something they want. And it's hard as a parent to say no. And it's hard as a child to understand no. But ultimately, we know as humans that if we were to get everything that we had ever wanted as a kid, what kind of person would we become as we move into adulthood? There would be no sense of understanding what it means to persevere, no sense of understanding what it means to not have something because it may be the best thing for us to not have that thing. There will be no appreciation for a journey, for a path, for the ups and the downs, the peaks and the valleys. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen to anyone is getting everything that you think you could ever want. Well, God, here in this story, he intervened with King Nebuchadnezzar, not to destroy him, but to rescue him. And in the same way, he is doing that in our lives. He would do that in our lives, and will if we invite him into our lives. We see it in Revelation chapter 18. Again, a call back to the Babylon. Fallen is Babylon the Great. This is verse 2 in Revelation 18. This is the Nebuchadnezzar impulse. Look at how great I am. Look at what I've built. And what does God do with Babylon here? Again, just like Nebuchadnezzar, he lets it fall. Again, not in a cruel way, but in a necessary way, in a merciful way. We all build our empires and we cling to this version of control. And when they collapse, sometimes it feels like God has left us. But perhaps God is actually inviting us in to knowing who he really is, knowing his mercy. You see, Jesus is the one king. He had all authority and he gave it up. He became weak so that we could be strong. He was broken, not because he was sinful, but because we were. At the cross, Jesus lost it all so that when we might lose everything, we could actually gain him, a relationship with him. So what if the collapse that perhaps has happened in your life or will happen, could happen one day, what if it's not the end, but what if it's the beginning? What if it's God's way of saying, come home, come back to be with me?
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.